Hi, I'm Jo, and I'm going to share a quick explainer with you to help you understand the Culturise approach to leading performance and team values in an organisation. We're going to talk about actions for outcomes, a modern approach to performance leadership. Most organisations have some things in common. We start with our vision and our purpose. What do we want to aim for? What do we stand for? What's our end game? In order to achieve that vision and purpose, we need to have values. We need to have some common platforms upon which we build behaviours and beliefs that we know represent our organisation. And so for many organisations, there's the organisation level values, and lots of teams then discuss their guiding principles, their more specific ways of doing things that represent the individual group that work together daily. They must align, by the way. Once we have our purpose, vision and values, we need to start getting into the how. What are the outcomes that we need to achieve in order to meet the vision and the purpose of the organisation? The best way to do this is to take all of the information you have and all of the strategic goals and distill it into a one-page document that can be shared across the organisation and across teams. And certainly, starting with an organisation-wide one-pager, individual business units can then come up with their departmental version of that one-pager that feeds into the overall game plan. So what's on that one-pager? The outcomes that we need to achieve to get to our purpose, and that's got to include the key elements of business as usual, but it also needs to include the strategic themes of the organisation. It's really important that we understand what is it alongside and in addition to business as usual that we're strategically aiming for in a world where we want our business to continue to grow and improve. Once we have our outcomes and lock them into our strategy, we need to be talking about our actions, our inputs. What are the things that each individual within the organisation is going to do? How well do they need to do them? How frequently and at what quality do they need to do them in order to play their part in achieving the outcomes and therefore the vision and purpose of the organisation? So I'm going to step you through two key tools for that right now. The first is a really powerful tool called the Culture Deck. The Culture Deck is a deck of 55 cards that effectively enable employees or prospective employees to define the things that matter to them most at work. So sharing with you a little story, at interviews I actually use these cards and we ask people to choose the 4 cards that represent the 4 things that matter most to them at work. Beyond asking them about their values, we now dive into that and ask them to describe scenarios where those things have gone well for them and not gone well for them at work. We get to a depth of understanding where we not only understand what their values are, but what is described by those values. How do they interpret them? And we get into experiential conversations where we can ask them for examples of what they've done in those areas to solve issues and challenges in the past. We can then use that culture deck to onboard employees, and we often share really fun workshops with employees across the board to have them choose their 4 most important things and build a depth of understanding amongst one another that even though our values might be quite similar, the way that we describe them, the way that we interpret them can be quite different. And so the culture deck becomes a really important tool in inclusion and helping employees understand that there's more than one way to describe a certain behaviour and a certain value in the workplace. It gets really powerful then for leaders once our employees have got this base of conversation talking to what matters to them at work. I encourage leaders to include the culture deck in their one-on-ones quarterly as part of their annual performance reviews and start the conversation with this. And we extend it a little bit further now where we say, once we've established the 4 things that matter most to that employee and our leader has asked the employee to discuss them, we're moving towards a really strong conversation of trust. We now ask our employees to rate them. How well are those 4 things going for them at work? How happy are they with them? How satisfied are they with those 4 things? And we work with the employee to come up with accountable actions that build resilience in employees by asking them a very simple, clear question. What's one specific thing that you can do to improve the score that you give any of the cards that is not achieving a 10 out of 10. So we build in continuous improvement focused around the employee taking responsibility for improving their own satisfaction with the very things that are most important to them at work. And this feeds beautifully then into our regular performance discussions. For some organisations, the culture deck is the whole process, and there's very varied ways that we can keep records of those commitments and continue to support them. Some you see on screen. For a lot of organisations, though, we need a little bit more framework around the KPIs and ensuring we have confidence that we can discuss those KPIs in the context of this conversation. And so once we've completed that conversation around our culture deck and what matters to us, we then tie it to the actions to outcomes framework. Our actions exist to achieve the outcomes. So the red box on the right-hand side there is where we put the end game. That's the purpose and vision of the organisation. Over here on the left-hand side is our actions area. The things that we do and how we do them, our doing and being measurably in order to complete what we need and achieve what we need to achieve the outcome. So we sit with our employees, and typically we will have 5 or 6 items in that actions area, and they will sit across values, usually customer, quality, productivity, and importantly, creativity, innovation, and strategy. We often lose those off the end and wonder why we're struggling to implement innovation in our organisation. So we'll have 5 or 6 key things. They need to be measurable and or describable so that we can have a robust conversation about our progress against what we want to achieve. If any of those are not being achieved at the level that we have set as our expectation, the first question, of course, is what's changed in the environment? Is there anything that's changed that might have rendered that target unreasonable? Assuming all things are level, however, there can only be 2 reasons that somebody isn't achieving the goal and the target that they've committed to at the beginning of a period, and that's skill and will. We explore, therefore, any shortfalls in performance or achievement using that language. It's clear, it's understandable, and it's supportive of our employees without losing sight of accountability. So we discuss whether there's an ability shortfall or a capacity shortfall in terms of skill, or whether in fact there's a challenge in terms of will and attitude. The will piece is around both attitude and motivation, and we don't for a moment presume that it's all sitting in the bucket with the employee. What we want to presume is that if there's attitude, that maybe there's something at play either through our leadership, through the culture of the organisation, or something outside of work that might be impacting upon the employee. So we want to create a safe and open space for them to explore that. The other one is motivation. Is the employee motivated generally to carry out a particular task or to do it in a particular way? And if not, why not? And again, we challenge leaders with the question, if not, is it something in terms of how we have helped or shown that employee the priorities? So we need to be ensure that both our words and our actions have prioritized the tasks at the right level, because often if an employee is not putting enough focus on something, it's simply because they didn't realize how important it was. So I'll take you now to the template that we use to record and document this conversation. The outcome over here is always present. So if we're reviewing and having a conversation with our teams every 3 months, then we are talking about the purpose of the organisation at least that often. I encourage leaders to be talking values daily and weekly, but again, you can see the number one conversation point in this discussion is values. And how will you measure that? In this instance, we've shared examples of 2 or 3 values per month that have been lived, led, or shared with a team or client. So we're using an exemplary model, and hopefully in some cases, leaders will be able to bring their own examples where they've been able to say, hey, I saw you do this and it was fantastic. We then have some measures around typically communication, client service, quality, productivity and timeliness. And at the bottom there, we have ideals like growth mindset, innovation and creativity. So we step through each of those. Each of them have a measurable and definable conversation to be had around how we're achieving those things. And then at the end of that conversation, we have at least one action, even when things are really going well, because of course we're in a world of continuous improvement, and no more than 3 actions for that employee to focus on with your support and a definable time frame. So we see there that we're now creating a record of a conversation, which may or may not be seen as a formal record in your organisation, where the employee is encouraged to define things that they can do to achieve commitments that they have made, and often they will tie closely to the values and the reasons that that employee wants to be in your workplace and improve their skills. So that's a summary of the two key elements that I feel really can contribute to leading and growing performance in your organisation. Thanks for listening. I'm sure you can get in touch with us, or we already have been talking to you, and we'll progress the conversation further.